on the record in the matter of the people of the state of Michigan versus Antonio Waller, file number 22-00105. FY, counsel.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Andrew Lacey appearing on behalf of the people.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. John Abbott representing Mr. Waller. He is present and seated to my right.
Today's the date that was set for preliminary examination. Are we ready to proceed on this matter?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Any preliminary matters?
None for the people.
None from the defense. Your Honor.
Thank you. Call your first witness.
For the first witness, Your Honor, people called to the stand, Officer Matthew Carlson.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury.
I do.
Thank you. You can have a seat there. Can you please state your first and last name and spell it?
Matthew Carlson, MATTHEWCARLSON.
Thank you. Okay, counsel, you can proceed.
Thank you. Officer Carlson, can you please state your occupation for the record?
I'm a police officer of the city of Lansing.
And how long have you been employed by the city of Lansing?
August of 2004.
So about a year and a half.
Yes.
And I'm gonna take you back to January 11th of 2022. Do you remember that date?
I do.
And were you working in your capacity as a police officer on that date?
I was.
Were you also working for Lansing on that date?
I was.
Okay. Were you working alone or with a partner?
Alone.
Okay. And what kind of vehicle were you in?
Ford Explorer patrol vehicle. Fully marked.
Okay, thank you. And what kind of uniform were you wearing?
Fully marked LPD or Lansing patrol uniform.
And on that day, did you have the occasion to be present in the area of Martin Luther King and Jolly?
Yes.
Okay. That's all. Is that an actual intersection? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay. And what is it? And that's in the city of Lansing, County of Ingham, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what brought you to that location?
We had a call for a U-Haul that a witness had seen a subject with a firearm get out of and then re-enter.
Okay. And you're saying that somebody had called and saw somebody get into and out of a U-Haul with a firearm?
There was a call for a subject that was supposed to have a firearm inside.
Okay. And were you able to find that U-Haul?
I was
Okay. And where did you find that U-Haul?
at the intersection of on Jolly Road, just west of Martin Luther King.
And what happened when you located that U-Haul?
I initiated a traffic stop.
Now, let me ask you, was there any additional information given to you about the U-Haul, or was it the only U-Haul in the area?
It was the only U-Haul in the area.
And what happened when you initiated that traffic stop?
It slowly proceeded down Jolly, still westbound, until it ended up pulling into the parking lot of St. Ives Party Store on Jolly and Pleasant Grove.
And what happened then?
Myself and Officer Culver made contact. I made contact with the driver of the U-Haul.
Okay, you indicated Officer Pulver?
Yep.
And yourself?
Yes.
Okay. You made contact with the driver?
I made contact with the driver. Officer Pulver made contact with the passenger side.
Okay. Do you know who the driver of the vehicle was?
I know her last name was Henderson. I'm not sure what her first name is.
You're indicating as a female though?
Yes.
Okay. And what happened when you talked to that female?
She provided her identification. I informed her why we were there.
Okay. And what happened next?
I went back and ran her, and there was also a middle seat passenger. I got his his information and ran him through Lean.
Do you remember that person's name?
I believe it was James.
And what happened when you ran them through Lean?
Both of those subjects showed misdemeanor warrants, but nothing that I was going to take them to jail on.
Okay. What did you do after that?
I gave them their information back and then made contact with Officer Pulver, who was dealing with our defendant, Mr. Waller, at the time.
Okay. And did you also have contact with Mr. Waller?
Yes.
Are you able to identify him in court?
Yes.
Are you able to identify him wearing a mask?
Yes.
Okay, if you can you please tell the court if he's here and point to an article that he is wearing?
He is, and he's in the jail uniform.
Your Honor, please let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant.
Any objection? Identification?
Everyone here, Your Honor, do you know if he has a beard or not
Today?
today?
Yes.
He does have a beard today?
Yes.
Did he have a beard on the night you arrested him?
I can't recall.
Remember what he was wearing the night you arrested him?
He had on a big black winter coat, and I'm not sure what his pants had on.
And how tall do you think he is?
Approximately 6'4".
Thank you. Looking for the- no objection to identification.
Identification is noted for the purposes of the exam.
Thank you. Now, when you originally were dispatched to that area, were you also given the description of a suspect that you were looking for?
Yes.
Okay, and did any of the three people in the U-Haul match that description?
Yes.
And who was that?
Mr. Waller.
Okay. And what happened when you approached Officer Pulver and the defendant?
So Officer Pulver had informed me that he didn't have a good identification on him,
Okay,
and that he provided the name of Bryant Lay.
okay, and what did you do with that information? Anything?
We ran Mr. Lay's information and were able to obtain a picture of Mr. Lay,
Okay,
and we were able to see that it did not match the description of Mr. Waller.
okay. What did you do based on that?
We attempted to get a fingerprint scanner to properly identify Mr. Waller.
Were you able to do that?
We had one in route, yes.
Okay. And who had the fingerprint ID scanner?
The Michigan State Police.
Okay. That's not something that LPD typically has access to, is that correct?
We do, but ours weren't working at the time.
Okay. And what happened at that point?
So we found out that Mr. Lay also had warrants, so we attempted to detain Mr. Waller on the basis of not identifying himself and that the subject he was giving us had warrants as well.
Okay. So twofold then, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what happened at that point?
Mr. Waller asked my partner to take a knife out of his back pocket.
Okay, and did you observe that?
I observed him take the knife out, yes.
Okay. And what happened then?
Mr. Waller then tensed up and turned into me, grabbing my leg and pushed me into the U-Haul.
Okay. When When you say you turned into, how did he do that? If you
He was facing away from the U-Haul, and I was on his right side, and he turned his body towards mine. Almost like a football tackle is the best way I can describe it,
Okay,
into the U-Haul.
okay,
And the only reason I didn't go to the ground is because the U-Haul stopped me.
okay. So indicating he pushed you?
Yeah.
Okay. And what happened then?
We were able to wrestle him to the ground,
And when you say we, who do you?
myself and Officer Culver.
Okay.
And when we went on the ground, he kept his hands clenched under himself near his waistband.
So is he on his stomach at this time?
Yes.
What did you do with his hands on his waistband?
We attempted to get them out from under him by just strengthening levers at that point.
Were you able to do so?
We were not.
Okay, what happened then?
Officer Waldrop came to assist us, and we had more units on the way to assist us. Officer Waldrop arrived and attempted to help us get his hands free, and he was unable to do so.
Okay, and what happened at that point?
At that point, I deployed my taser at Mr. Waller, and we were able to take him into custody.
And the taser was deployed. Were you concerned at that point for officer safety?
Yes.
And that was due to the
The
initial complaint?
yes.
Were you able to make contact with Mr. Waller's person the first time the taser was deployed?
One pro made connection.
And would you say that it was ineffective?
Yes.
He was still able to move at that point?
Yes.
And then did you have to deploy your taser a second time?
Yes.
Okay, and would you say that was effective?
Yes.
And at that point, were you able to take control of his hands?
Yes.
Okay. Now, prior to him pushing you into the U-Haul, were you trying to put him under arrest? Or were you trying to detain him in some fashion, or was he already detained?
I don't remember if we ever advised him that he was actually physically under arrest.
Okay.
I think that was our goal, was to place him under arrest. I don't know that we ever advised him, but we did advise him to stand up.
Okay, so at least that part. And would you say at that point, after you said, stand up, put your hands behind your back, is that when he pushed you into the U-Haul?
It's when he got tense and then began to push me.
Okay. And sorry, take this backwards. When Mr. Waller had his hands on his waistband underneath his stomach, did you believe him to have a weapon on him at that time?
I knew that there was a possibility. And I know that a lot of subjects that carry firearms carry them in their waistband.
Okay. After you were able to gain control of Mr. Waller's hands, was there a pat down conducted?
It was my understanding that my partner had already conducted a pat down
Oh,
after he exited the vehicle.
okay. So you did not see one?
I did not.
And were you aware of any other weapons being found on Mr. Waller's person?
Other than the knife.
Yes.
No.
Okay. Now, were you made aware that there was a firearm located in the vehicle?
After Mr. Waller was in custody.
do you know where that firearm was located in the vehicle?
In the glove box where Mr. Waller was sitting.
And there was just 3 people inside the vehicle at the time, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you see that firearm at some point?
Yes.
Would you be able to recognize it?
Yes.
I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show what's been marked as people's proposed exhibit 1, 2, 3, and 4 to defense counsel. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Officer Carlson, can you please look at those without saying anything about them to recognize those photos?
Yes.
Okay. Did you recognize all 4 of those photos?
Yes.
And can you tell me how you recognize those photos?
I took them.
Okay. And you would say that
I took them all except the last one.
this is the last one. Okay. And would you say who took that last photo? Do you know?
Officer Culver.
Okay. Now, photos 1 through 3. Can you tell me what those are? Just a basic overview.
Photo 1 is the gun that was found in Mr. Waller's U-Haul. Photo number 2 is the magazine that was in the gun.
Okay.
Photo number 3 is the ammunition found in the
Okay.
magazine.
Now, was the ammunition you said in the magazine?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know or do you remember if the gun was loaded?
It was loaded one in the chamber.
Okay. And you would say that those photographs accurately depict the state of the gun and the magazine as you received it? Or as you photographed it, I'm sorry?
Yes.
And that was preceding this incident?
Yes.
Okay. Was it right after this incident or how did it?
The gun was turned over to me on scene. and
Okay.
then I brought it up to the reporter and tagged it in while I was writing my report. So it was approximately a couple hours after the initial incident.
Do you remember who turned that gun over to you?
Officer Robeson.
But you're indicating that even if it was a couple hours later, it was still in the same condition you received it in, is that correct? And Your Honor, I'd ask that those be admitted as people's exhibits 1 through 3.
No, thank
Published to the court.
Yes.
Do, and then Officer Carlson, can you tell me how you recognize photo number 4?
That's me.
Okay. And can you tell me what's depicted in that photograph?
The injury might be
And what kind of injury was it that you sustained?
abrasions.
Which knee is it?
My,
Left knee?
yes.
And did you have any abrasions to your left knee prior to this altercation with Mr. Waller?
No.
Okay. Would you indicate that the abrasion to your left knee is as a result of this altercation with Mr. Waller?
Yes.
And you would also indicate that that is an accurate depiction of the injuries he sustained during this incident?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would ask that this be admitted as people's exhibit number 4.
No objection.
Is admitted.
And did you have any other interactions with Mr. Waller in this case?
No.
Okay. And did you have I withdraw my question there. I don't have well, I'm gonna ask you this. Were you ever able to get the correct identification of Mr. Waller?
Yes.
And how did that take place?
Michigan State Police arrived with a scanner.
And did you observe this, how to describe it, transaction between the two of them?
They were in the back of the ambulance room when they fingerprinted him, and I was outside the ambulance room.
Okay. You were present,
Yes.
and did they show you what the results were?
Yes.
And do you remember what those were?
It was Antonio Lamar Waller.
Hearsay.
Objections to hearsay. Did you want to respond?
Well, Your Honor, I think that the officer has sufficiently identified the defendant by person. I'm just trying to establish if there was a name ever determined for him. And he did observe it with his own eyes, so I think that would be sufficient as well.
Overrule the objection. He did make the observation as to what the results of the scan was. And that identified as the defendant's name. So the objections are ruled.
Officer Carlson, as a result of the name provided and observed by you, as a result of the fingerprint scan, did you pull the lean of Mr. Waller?
I did.
And did you determine whether or not he was able to have a handgun on this person?
I only ran his once. Officer Roberson ran his CCH.
Okay. You're indicating he had warrants at the time?
Yes.
And when you're running warrants, are you able to see if he has any criminal history?
Not from our department.
Okay. Okay, I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Cross-exam.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
You just mentioned Officer Robeson,
Yes.
and so she participated in this arrest and investigation,
Yeah, she assisted.
and she actually was the first one to call in the complaint.
The first time that it got dispatched, she was in the area and said that she was not able to locate it.
And you wrote a report on this
Yes.
incident. And did you review that before you came to court today?
Yes.
Okay. I noticed that when you testified a minute ago, you said that the report indicated that a person got out of a truck and then got back in. Recall testifying that way?
I do.
However, there's nothing, did you notice that there's nothing in your report about him getting back in the vehicle?
I did.
You did notice that?
I did notice that.
And did you notice it similarly in Officer Carlson's and Officer Robeson's reports? There's no mention in their reports that he ever got back in the vehicle?
I did not review Officer Robeson's report.
Okay, so you've added that detail today?
I may have misspoke. He may have not ever been seen getting back into it. I may have
Okay.
added that by accident.
Do you recall that the original report was that somebody observed someone get out of a U-Haul truck with a gun?
Yes.
And you went to the corner of Holmes and MLK?
No.
Even though your report says you were dispatched to that location?
I was dispatched to that location, but I'd never made it out there before I located what I believe.
Okay, and that was a U-Haul truck?
Yes.
And dispatch didn't actually provide you with a license plate, did you?
No.
And they didn't tell you how many people were in the truck? No. And they identified the suspect as a tall black person wearing a black coat?
Yes.
And so at some point you saw a U-Haul drive by?
I was coming down Jolly Road eastbound, and in the time frame when I was dispatched, when they saw the U-Haul on Holmes, it was not very much time lapse. It was late at night, and it appeared to be the only U-Haul in the area that would have matched the description.
Okay, so you were driving down Jolly, you got to MLK?
Yep.
And that's when you saw the U-Haul?
Yes.
And that was approximately a mile south. That's exactly a mile south of Holmes, right? Okay, so you're a mile south of where it was reported?
Right.
And just as you arrived there, there happened to be a U-Haul? Right. And that was the first U-Haul you saw?
Yes.
And you're aware that there's plenty of U-Haul dealerships in Lansing. There's one right at the corner of Holmes and MLK?
not aware of when it comes in MLK, but I know there's one at Cedar and Jolly.
There's one at Cedar and Jolly, and there's one on Waverly, just south of Michigan Avenue there. Right, so there's plenty of places to get a U-Haul. And you testified that this was the only U-Haul in the area, right?
The only U-Haul on the road that
That you saw,
was in the area that would have made sense.
but you didn't look around the area. It just happened to be right there when you got the Martin Luther King. And as far as matching the description, you saw that there was a black guy in the U-Haul,
I did not see the black U-Haul originally.
and you didn't have a license plate to work with?
No.
It just happened to be a U-Haul truck?
Correct.
And that's why you pulled it over?
U-Haul box truck that at the time, by the time the dispatch gets the call, it would have made sense that it was going south of Holmes. And I think it had plenty of time to make it that mile by the time that I located it.
Right. And was there something in the dispatch record that indicated it was headed south?
Yes. Well, I'm not sure if it said what direction it was headed, but it said it was on King south of Holmes. So
Right.
I guess it didn't specify what direction it was headed.
So it didn't say which direction he was going, but that was the first U-Haul you saw.
Yes.
Okay. And you approached the driver's side, right?
Yes.
And there were how many people in the cab?
3.
And they were all taken out and interviewed?
The only one taken out was Mr. Waller. I made contact with the female driver and I did not figure out. I just gave her a direction.
Other 2 stayed in the cab?
Yes.
And you referred to the vehicle as Mr. Waller's U-Haul, but you never found any evidence that he was the person that leased it, right?
No.
In fact, the driver is the person that leased the vehicle, right?
I believe so. It was either her or her daughter.
Okay. And this was what size vehicle was this? How high was the?
It was a normal size box truck, so I'm not sure exactly how high, but it was taller than I am.
And so like the bottom, if you roll down the window, the bottom of that window would be like eye level or so?
Yeah.
Okay. So looking in, you couldn't see from the street or from a vehicle on the street how tall anybody was? So when the call comes in like that, you're looking for U-Hauls in the area and you located one a mile south, does that mean that you think it would be reasonable to find any of the U-Hauls within a 1 mile radius of that location would be susceptible to being pulled over?
That are driving.
Yeah.
I guess potentially.
Okay.
But
He wasn't.
The reason I stopped is they said that it was on King south of Holmes. This U-Haul was on King turning from the direction of Holmes, like coming south from Holmes. And it was 11 o'clock at night, which is, I guess, atypical for when I would see a normal U-Haul.
Okay.
I just didn't think there were very many U-Hauls out on the roads at that time,
So you just thought it was suspicious that there was a U-Haul around.
based on the nature of the call and the location. Yeah.
And the call was the guy got out of a truck with a gun.
Right.
And he was walking down the street.
Right.
On Kavanaugh. And the basis for pulling the truck over, she wasn't speeding, right?
No.
And she didn't fail to use the turn signal. There was no violation of traffic law. And the other 2 occupants of the vehicle were not charged with possession of a firearm.
You gotta know. I couldn't hear your answer.
No, I'm sorry.
And did you know if anyone tested the firearm for fingerprints or anything?
I believe our CSI texted, but not that night. They didn't.
So we don't have any results one way or the other, or was it?
I'm not sure one way or another. To be
Okay.
honest with
You remember what kind of coat he was wearing?
you. It was like a black winter coat, large winter
All
coat.
black?
It had some gray on it.
Okay. Thank you, nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
If you're, I don't have a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Officer Carlson. You can be excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Call your next witness.
For their next witness, people call to stand Officer Damon Culver.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. You can have a seat there, officer. Please state your first and last name. Spell them both for me.
Damon Pulver, DAMONPULVER.
Please proceed. Thank you.
Can you please state your occupation for the record?
I am a police officer, the Lansing Police Department.
And how long have you been employed by the Lansing Police Department?
I've been employed with LPD since December of 2017.
So a little over 4 years?
Yep.
I want to take you back to January 11th, 2022. Were you working on that date?
I was.
And you're working in your capacity as a police officer?
I was.
Now, it looks like this incident took place on the 12th, but it looks like you may have been dispatched around midnight, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it would have been January 12th.
Yeah.
Okay. Still working in your capacity as a police officer on that date,
Correct.
and were you working for Lansing on both those dates?
I was.
Do you remember if you're working alone or with a partner?
I was working by myself.
Okay, and what kind of vehicle were you in?
I was in a fully marked patrol vehicle.
Okay, and what kind of clothes were you wearing?
I was in a fully marked police uniform.
And on that date, did you have the occasion to be in the area of MLK and Kavanaugh, or were you dispatched to that location?
Yes, I was dispatched to that area for weapons control.
Okay, and is that in the city of Lansing,
It
county
is.
of Ingham?
It is.
And did you make it to MLK and Kavanaugh?
I made it to MLK and Jolly when my partner told me that he saw the vehicle.
Okay.
Which is a few blocks away from King and Kavanaugh.
Okay. Thank you. All right, and what happened when you were dispatched to that area?
When I was dispatched to that area, we were looking for a U-Haul truck. A caller had called in and said that a black male wearing a black jacket, a black cap, came out of the passenger side with a gun. We were checking the area. My partner located the vehicle going westbound on Jolly from MLK.
And what did you do when you arrived there?
When we got to the area, my partner initiated a traffic stop on the vehicle, and I assisted with the traffic stop.
Okay, and what did you do to assist?
I did a passenger side approach and spoke to the passenger.
Okay. And you be able to recognize that person again?
I would.
And would you be able to recognize that person with a mask on?
I would.
Is that person present in the courtroom today?
They are.
Can you please point to that person and describe something that they're wearing for the court?
The gentleman sitting over there with the blue jacket on.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please let the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant.
No objection.
So moved.
And you did indicate he was the passenger, correct?
He was the passenger.
And did you have contact with anyone else in the vehicle?
I did not.
Were there other passengers in the vehicle?
There were 2 other passengers.
And what did you do when you made contact with the passenger?
When I contacted the passenger, I originally noticed that he was wearing a black jacket, black cap, and black nail, which matched the description that the caller gave the individual with the gun.
Okay.
I noticed that the
Pardon
individual,
me, I just couldn't hear that last sentence. Can you say that again about what he was wearing?
yes, he was wearing a black jacket with a black hat,
My hat.
black hat.
And what happened when you thought he matched the description?
When I made contact with him, I noticed that he didn't have his seatbelt on. I asked the individual to step out of the vehicle, which he complied with, and asked him if he would consent to a Terry pat, which he did. I conducted a Terry pat, and I did not locate any weapons. And I conducted an interview with him at the back of the U-Haul truck.
And what were you able to ascertain any information from him during that interview?
Yes, he identified himself as Bryant Lay. I can't remember the specific date of birth that he gave me, but that was the name that he provided with me, along with another date of birth.
And did you do anything with that name?
I did. I looked up that name in the lien system and looked up the Secretary of State photo that came back with that. It came back as a real name, but the photo of the person did not match the individual that I was speaking to.
Okay, and as a result of that, did you do anything else?
With the person afterwards?
Yes.
Yes.
What did you do?
I confronted the individual and I told him that the photo that I was looking at did not match him. And he insisted that that was his name.
Okay. What did you do next?
I told the individual that he was going to be detained in handcuffs until I could positively identify who he was. I was going to use a fingerprint scanner to come and get a positive ID on the subject.
Okay. And how are you gonna get that fingerprint scanner?
There was an MSP officer in the area that had a fingerprint scanner.
Does LPD typically have access to those?
We do, yes.
Why did you not? Were you not able to use those in the instance?
I didn't have one on me. Normally it's a sergeant that has them.
Okay.
And there was a road patrol officer that was in the area. Showed up not too long after I requested it, so.
And what happened next?
The individual refused to stand up. He said that he had done nothing wrong and did not want to comply with the demands that I gave him to stand up and put his hand behind his back.
Okay, and you indicated he refused to stand up. Was he sitting down?
Yes, he was sitting down on the tailgate of the U-Haul truck.
Okay. No. When you're telling him to stand up and put his hands behind his back, were you attempting to put him into custody or just continue to detain him?
At that point, I was trying to detain him. After he said that he wasn't going to be standing up, I told him that he would go to jail if he wasn't going to. So at the start, it was just to figure out, who he was. But after he refused to, then it became an arrest.
Okay, and what happened next?
He continued to refuse to do so. Me and my partner, Officer Carlson, grabbed onto his arms and told him to stand up. Again, he was refusing to do so. At that point, we asked for other officers to come over and assist us with the arrest.
And were you present? He advanced towards Officer Carlson.
I was.
What happened?
So he stood up at one point and wanted us to look for a knife that he said was on him.
Okay.
I didn't locate a knife and he untensed his arm. Previously, when I was grabbing onto his arm was tensed up and he wouldn't allow me to move it. Once it untensed, I tried to put his hand behind his back, and then he pulled his arm away from me and then turned towards Officer Carlson. And pinned him up against the car.
Okay,
Officer Carlson told me that he was grabbing onto his legs, that the subject was grabbing onto Officer Carlson's legs. And then I went further to do some knee strikes on the individual to try to get him off of Officer Carlson.
and were those effective?
They were effective.
And were you yourself assaulted in any fashion?
At one point, the subject did grab onto one of my legs, but it was for a very brief moment of time. I was able to get my leg away from him.
Did you sustain any injuries as a result of this?
I did not. Well, I guess I scraped up my hand a little bit,
Okay.
but no crazy. injuries.
Oh, yeah. Your Honor, what I'm showing is from Marcus People's Exhibit number 5 to defense counsel. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Okay. So, Officer Pulver, I'm giving you the Marcus People's Exhibit number 5.
Yep.
Just let me know if you recognize that.
I did.
They indicated that you scraped up your hand.
I did.
Now, there's also a picture of a leg in there. Do you know if that's your leg?
That is Officer Carlson's leg.
Okay. And how do you recognize and kind of differentiate between the photos?
Well, I can differentiate. Well, I see myself in the photo, and then I see my hand, and I recognize that that's my hand. I know that that's not my leg because that's not my leg.
And did you take the photographs of Officer Carlson?
I did.
And based on that photo, is that what you remember his knee looking like?
I did.
Okay. So, for printing.
Yeah.
You would say that those injuries on your hand, so had you had those injuries prior to this incident with Mr. Waller?
I did not.
And would you, to the best of your recollection, you sustained those injuries during this altercation with
I
him?
did. Yes.
Okay, and you would say that that photograph is an accurate depiction of what your hand looked like after this incident?
Yes.
And you described it as not serious, but a little scratches?
Not serious, but superficial scratches to my hand.
Okay, Your Honor, I would ask that People's Exhibit number 5 be admitted.
No objection.
Um, Sorry, Your Honor, I'm thrown off by the leg. What happened after you were able to get Mr. Waller away from Officer Carlson?
He got to the ground at a point, and another officer, Officer Waldrop, came over and assisted us in rolling him over to his belly.
And let me stop you real quick. You say he got onto the ground. Are you referring to Mr. Waller?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And you said Officer Waldrop came and assisted?
Yes.
Okay, when he was on the ground, what was he doing?
He was moving his arms inwards towards his waistband.
Okay, and did that cause you any concern?
It caused me some concern. When I originally did my Terry Pat, I was looking for a firearm and I didn't locate any. When he was talking to us about the knife that he might have on him, I was able to search his front left pocket and his back 2 pockets, but I wasn't able to search his front right pocket.
Okay, so you thought potentially there's still a knife there.
Potentially, there still could be a knife involved. Yes.
And what did you do at that point?
At that point, when his left arm was in towards his waistband, I took my right knee and put it in between the back of his arm and his torso to try to pry his arm away from his body.
Okay, and was that effective?
It was effective. I was able to get his arm away from his body a little bit, and then he turned inwards for me, and that's when he grabbed my leg.
Okay, and was there a taser deployed at any point during this?
There was. Eventually, we were able to gain a little bit of control over him. Officer Carlson took out his taser and told Mr. Waller that he was going to tase him if he didn't comply. Mr. Waller literally told him to tase him, and he ended up tasing.
Okay, and did that first deployment take effect?
The first deployment, one of the probes went into his back. The second probe either ricocheted off of him or didn't make contact. So there had to be a second shot of taser probes that were effective.
Okay, and at that point, were you able to gain control over him?
I was.
And What happened after
After that, once we got him into custody, we immediately asked for the fire department to come out to assist in medical aid. We turned him over into the recovery position, got him off from his belly. And waited there until medics arrived.
that? You indicated a recovery position. Can you just tell me what that is?
Yes, that is being up on their side, so they're not down on the ground, so they're able to breathe.
Okay.
We conducted the rest of the search after that, did not locate anything else.
On his person?
Correct.
And did you have the occasion to search in the U-Haul vehicle?
I did not search the U-Haul vehicle.
Okay. Were you present when the vehicle was searched?
I was in the area, yeah.
After that search was conducted, were you made aware that there were any weapons recovered from the vehicle?
I was.
And can you describe did you see the weapon that was recovered?
I did.
And what kind of weapon was it?
It was a Glock 45 9mm handgun that was black and silver.
Your Honor, if I could show the witness, I believe what's been marked as exhibit number 1.
Yes.
Thank you. I am showing the witness has been marked as people's exhibit number 1, and Officer Fulver, can you tell me if that is the weapon that you remember being recovered from the vehicle?
That is.
Okay, thank you. And do you know where that was recovered from?
I was told it was recovered from a glove box.
And when you were talking to the defendant outside of the vehicle, were you able to see inside the cabin at all?
Yeah, I was able to see that.
And can you tell me where that glove box was located?
It was right in front of him.
Was there anything that happened after you were able to place Mr. Waller in the recovery position that you remember with regards to him?
We took him to the hospital. Got him medical treatment there.
I have no further questions. Sir.
Thank you. So at some point you asked Mr. Waller to get out of the cab?
I did.
And he got out of the cab?
Yep.
And at that point, the guy that was seated in the middle slid over?
I didn't see anyone slide over into the passenger seat.
And this is in a glove box of a truck cab?
This was.
And they're all three of them all sitting on the same, was it a bench seat?
I remember there being a driver's seat and a passenger seat, and I believe the third person, there might have been a back row. I didn't really see the third person at all. I just didn't see them.
You didn't notice there was a third guy in the cab?
I didn't know it was a third person until my partner told me there was. I only saw the first two originally.
But there was, anybody in the cab could reach the glove box, right?
It was in arm span, yes.
Notice in your report, you wrote that the subject was a black male and was wearing a black jacket, black pants, and short black hair. You recall writing that?
I do.
And yet today you testified that he had a hat on.
Now that I think about when I was reviewing my report, I might have gotten confused as to what I saw.
And the confusion arises because the description of the person you're looking for is a guy wearing a hat, right?
The confusion was that I read my report and I remember reading that description
Right.
and said that description that I read was part of the witness statement and was not part of what I had typed earlier.
Right.
So I got those two mixed up.
Right. So the witness said the guy's wearing a black cap or a stocking cap.
Right, that is what dispatch told us, correct.
Right, and the guy you find did not have a hat,
He did not have it.
and no hat was recovered,
No.
and when he went to jail, he didn't have a hat. Okay. And you mentioned that his seatbelt was off.
Yes.
The truck had been parked for a minute or two, hadn't it?
It had not been parked for a minute. I got out of my vehicle and made my passenger side approach a second, but it stopped in the parking lot.
Okay. And was it your opinion then, from that perspective, that this person matched the description of the person that was walking down Kavanaugh with a gun?
They had, I believe that this person matched the description of what the witness was describing.
Could you tell how tall he was by sitting there? He was sitting in the cab of the truck when you first saw him, right?
Correct.
And like the bottom of the window is about eye level.
Yeah.
So you couldn't see what kind of pants he's wearing.
I could not see the pants.
You couldn't tell how tall he was
I could not tell.
or how heavy he is.
Correct.
He's not wearing a hat,
Yes,
but you met the description.
for the most part, yeah.
Okay.
Outside of the hat.
And is it your understanding that the reason this truck was pulled over is because it was a U-Haul truck?
Yeah.
Yep. And, did anyone ever go back to the complaining witness and say, is this the guy you saw?
Someone went back to the complaining witness, but there was no show up that was conducted.
No. And there was never any license plate reported in the report. Be on the lookout for a specific license plate.
Not that I recall.
So we really don't even know if this was the same U-Haul trailer or U-Haul truck that that person saw.
Pretty uncommon for a U-Haul truck to be driving around that time of night, but
But,
there was not a specific license plate given.
okay. Do you know when the U-Haul was rented?
I do not.
You know who possessed it before these people got into it?
I do not.
And it's your understanding that U-Hauls are rented out all the time and different people use them.
Different people use U-Haul.
Yes. And any one of those people in the truck or the prior user might have put that pistol in the glove box.
Possibility.
Okay. And do you have any information on any fingerprints? Did they get any fingerprints off that gun?
I don't know. Not that I know.
And the original call came in, stated that a person got out of a truck and was walking down the street with a gun.
Correct.
Okay. And we don't know if the gun was loaded,
The caller did not.
and the caller didn't know if the gun had been kept in a locked gun case or something inappropriately carried.
I didn't interview the witness, so I don't know.
But it certainly wasn't part of the original call that went out.
When the call went out, it said that that individual had a gun. I don't know the fashion of which they were carrying it or how the witness saw it.
But they were just walking down the street with a gun.
That's what we were told.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
I have questions. You said that it's not typical to see a U-Haul driving around at this time of night. What time of night was it?
It was about midnight. We were driving in the area. There was no other vehicles or anyone else driving around.
Okay, and the other question was, just for my clarity, when you say cap, you're referring to like a baseball cap or a stocking cap?
I didn't see a hat. I don't know what the caller said that they
Okay.
were wearing. I just know that it was a black hat that they said they were wearing.
Okay, thank you. No, I don't have any other questions. Any reader?
Just briefly, Reader. Now, Mr. Abbott keeps mentioning that there was a call regarding a male walking down the street. Is that the call that you remember, or do you remember that saying that exited the vehicle?
The caller said that the individual had exited the passenger door of the U-Haul truck
Okay,
and walked into the apartment complex of Marvin Gardens and then went back into the vehicle.
okay. And you remember that specifically?
I do.
Okay. And, are you familiar with the Marvin Gardens apartment complex?
I am.
And can you tell me approximately how far that is from the area in which the U-Haul stopped?
So Marvin Gardens is at King and Kavanaugh, which is where the call came out at. And the vehicle was stopped at St. Ives, which is Jolly and Pleasant Grove. So, I don't know, maybe a minute or two drive.
Okay. And you don't know approximately how long it was between the original call coming in and you and Officer Carlson arriving at the U-Haul?
It was very quick. But I remember,
Would you say it was within 5 minutes?
say less than that. I remember in the area. I think when the call came out, I was at Jolly in Washington, which is maybe 3 blocks away from Jolly and King, when Officer Carlson on the vehicle.
Okay. Less than 5 minutes, correct?
Witness.
Um, And then. And then, Attorney, I asked you about the hat. Do you remember that being part of the call out? Now that you're in front of us?
Yes.
Okay. And you're indicating you did not see him wearing a hat at the time, correct?
Correct.
But that he was a black male wearing a large black coat, is that correct?
Correct.
And that was also consistent with the description that you were given, is that correct?
Incorrect.
And he's in a U-Haul vehicle,
In the passenger seat as well.
in the passenger seat, which is also, okay. Okay, I have no further questions.
Okay. But Yes, Officer be excused.
Yes.
Thank you, Officer Coleman.
Thank you.
Can you find any additional witnesses?
No, Your Honor, I do not have any additional witnesses. I do, however, have a plaintiff's proposed exhibit number 6, which is a certified conviction from the 14th Judicial Circuit Court in Muskegon County. To present to the court.
Okay.
And I would ask that that be admitted to exhibit number 6.
You have here a certified,
Huh? Yes.
it is a certified copy. Did you want to examine it?
No, Your Honor, if you say it's a certified copy, it's a certified copy. As far as I'm concerned.
And it does have a certification at the bottom there.
Thank you.
No problem. The People's Exhibit 6 will be admitted. Okay, is defense calling any witnesses?
Today, Your Honor.
Okay, we can proceed to argument.
Thank you, Your Honor. Here, the defendant is charged with 1 count of carrying concealed weapon, 1 count of felon in possession of a firearm, and only one count of assaulting, resisting, obstructing a police officer, although it could arguably be 2 counts. Here we have a call out for a passenger, a large black male wearing a black coat, maybe a black hat, who's in possession of a firearm, who is the passenger of a U-Haul vehicle. Officers go to investigate and see 1 U-Haul vehicle traveling down the road. They indicate that this is unusual for this time of night, being approximately 11:30 or midnight, and that there were no other vehicles in the area. They do make contact with the U-Haul driver, who is cooperative with them, as well as a passenger who also cooperates with them. When they make contact with Mr. Waller, who's a passenger in this vehicle, however, he provides them with a false name. Unfortunately for him, that person also had warrants with a statewide pickup. So, and a a Secretary of State photograph that did not match his person. So they were able to determine relatively quickly that he was not who he was telling them was. They were able to use a fingerprint scanner to determine his actual identity with the help of an MSP trooper. They do have contact with him at the back of the U-Haul to try to, while they're detaining him, to just try to determine who he actually is. Once they determine he is not who he said he was, in that interim period, he does shove or push Officer Carlson into the U-Haul, and he is unable to break free until Officer Pulver helps to get him off or away from him so he can actually move around. They get the defendant on the ground, and while he is on the ground, he is refusing to put his hands up and to be detained. He's reaching around his waistband where the officers have indicated, one, it's consistent with people who carry firearms. They do carry firearms typically in their waistband, and or the weapon that he told officers that he had that they were unable to locate being a knife. Either weapon would caused them both concerns for officer safety due to the uncooperative nature of Mr. Waller. They had to deploy a taser 2 times in order to gain control over him. There was a gun, in fact, found in the U-Haul vehicle in which he was traveling. It was located in the glove box, which was directly in front of where Mr. Waller had been sitting. The officer who spoke to the other passengers in the vehicle made a determination that they were not going to be arrested that night. Not the same for Mr. Waller. As a result of the altercation, Officer Carlson did sustain some abrasions to his left knee. Officer Pulver also sustained some superficial wounds to his hand. The gun, Your Honor, as was indicated, was carried in the glove box, which is directly in front of the passenger seat, and Officer Carlson did testify that it did take the U-Haul a few moments to stop. I believe he indicated it was a few streets that it continued down after he had tried to effectuate that traffic stop. At the time that this incident took place, Mr. Waller was unable or ineligible to possess a firearm, and because of the prior conviction. For those reasons, Your Honor, I am asking that he be bound over on counts 1, 2, and 3, carrying concealed weapon. Obviously, this vehicle he was driving in did have a weapon in it. It is attributed to him because of where he was seated with regards to where the weapon was actually found. Again, ineligible to possess a firearm at the time, and it is clear to me at least that there was definitely obstructing going on with regards to Mr. Waller and both Officer Carlson and Officer Pulver, but further, he did, I would say that he also assaulted Officer Carlson by pushing him against that U-Haul vehicle, and he did definitely endanger both of their persons by failing to comply with their commands. After having advised that he was supposed to be in possession of a knife, and they having reason to believe that he also could potentially have been in possession of a firearm at some point, although they did do a pat down originally and did not locate a weapon on his person. For those reasons, Your Honor, I ask that it be bound over on all 3 counts.
Thank you, Your Honor. The call came in that they'd seen a person get out of a truck and walk down the street with a firearm. Apparently there was something about apartments, that there was something in the police reports about an apartment. But even if there is,
I haven't seen the police report, so I can't.
I know.
That's what he testified to.
That's what he said, and I don't know why I didn't write it down. Nobody did right now. But nevertheless, Your Honor, it's not against the law to get out of a truck with a gun and walk down the street. There's no law violated there. In fact, I'm sure their annual Second Amendment rally that they have here in town, there's 100 guys walking around with guns all day long, and they don't get arrested, but it's not illegal to walk around with a gun. Guy gets out of a car, walks from his car into his apartment or walks down the street, is not breaking the law. So there's no basis for pulling this car over. He said so himself. They didn't break the law. They weren't speeding. There was no traffic violations. There was no allegation that anyone had broken the law and that they pulled the car over. And it sounds like any African-American driving a U-Haul that night would have been pulled over the same way within a mile of the corner of Martin Luther King and Holmes Road. The fact that he claimed that I didn't do anything wrong and I'm not gonna let you arrest me. I understand completely how he feels. Well, I don't, Your Honor. I understand what he says. I don't know how he feels. So, but I think, he has a right to resist an unlawful arrest under People v. Moreno, which is 491-38 in 2012, that if he gets pulled out of a car and he hasn't broken any laws, that they can't just start finding things wrong. Well, we'll run this guy in lean and we'll run this guy's record and we'll take a fingerprint of this guy. And we'll search the car. Now we've got something to arrest him for. There has to be something at the beginning of the stop that justifies the stop. And in this case, there was none.
But wasn't the testimony of the officer that they asked him his name first and he gave a name that didn't match him before they detained him?
Sure, but they didn't have any business asking him his name until.
Well, they were doing an investigatory stop because they had got a call about a firearm complaint.
But the firearm call didn't describe a crime. It described a guy getting out of a car with a gun and walking down the street, and maybe walking into an apartment. That's not against the law.
Possibly. We don't know what was happening at midnight.
That's all the information we have, is that he
That's
walked.
all. Right.
He was in possession of a firearm. And it's not against the law to be in possession of a firearm.
Unless you're a felon, but then it would be against the law.
Well, if they had they didn't have any information that he wasn't. They can't develop that information after they arrest him. They have to know before they stop him for possession by a felon that he's a felon. I think that they got it out of sequence here. You can't arrest a guy for nothing and then figure out later that it's a felon. You've got to have a good reason to arrest him. And just carrying a gun in plain view, they call it open carry. You can open carry even in the middle of the night, even on MLK.
But again, he was not arrested for carrying the gun. They stopped him and asked a question.
Yes.
But the information he provided at the time was what caused the detainment.
Right. And then it all slid downhill from there quickly. But
Because the information provided was determined to not be accurate information. But I
Okay.
understand your argument clearly.
okay,
Okay. Is there any re-argument from the prosecution?
No, Your Honor.
Today was the date that was set for a preliminary examination. At the time of preliminary examination, the burden is that of probable cause. It's probable cause that a crime was committed and probable cause to charge the defendant with the crime. And probable cause requires more than mere suspicion that a crime was committed, but not as much information as would be required at the time of trial. At the time of trial, the burden is then beyond reasonable doubt. We're not looking at that burden today. We're only looking at whether or not there's more than mere suspicion that a crime was committed and that the defendant committed the crime. We heard testimony from Officer Matthew Carlson, stated that he reported to the area of MLK and Jolly, City of Lansing, Ingham County, on January 11, 2022. And that he reported to that area because he received a phone call where there was a report of a witness who seen a subject with a firearm. That he initiated the traffic stop. But the description given by the subject was that it was a U-Haul. There was a black man wearing a black coat. Maybe he had a cap, maybe he didn't. And that he was seen exiting the passenger side of the vehicle. The officers made a traffic stop. Officer Over later testified that he made contact, I believe, with the person identified as the defendant, Mr. Waller, in this matter, asked the defendant for his name. He gave the name that when ran and lean did not come back with the same picture as the person that they were talking to. In addition to that, that person had some warrants for statewide pickup. Officer testified, Officer Culver that was testified that the defendant was told that he would be detained until they could identify him. They attempted to take or to place him in the cuffs so that he can be detained, and the defendant allegedly resisted the detainment. He also turned his body toward Officer Carlson, pushing him in some form and causing him to fall into the U-Haul. He was later wrestled to the ground, still resisting. They were unable to cuff him, and tasers had to be deployed, I think, twice before they were able to get him into custody. So the first issue is to whether or not there was valid reason for the stop. I think it's important that the court explains that probable cause is a common sense standard. It's relatively flexible and it can be based on the facts and circumstances presented at the time of the examination. And so it could be based on circumstantial evidence, and it also needs to be based on the totality of the circumstances. There was a call given to the officer or to officers about a male exiting a U-Haul midnight in the area of Kavanaugh, I believe, in MLK. Not too far from Jolly and MLK, but in that area, and that the individual, still questionable as to whether or not he had a stocking cap, but if he had a stocking cap, that would also cause some red flags. At midnight, someone exiting a U-Haul with a stocking cap, wearing black, and a firearm. That would cause any reasonable person to assume that there may be some crime afoot. And so I believe the officers had a responsibility and duty to investigate the possibility of the crime. And so a stop was made. And again, the false name was provided allegedly. Then we all have heard multiple times what transpired from that point. Therefore, the court is satisfied that there is sufficient probable cause to bind over on count one as to weapons carrying concealed. That matter, we've gone over to the circuit court. Based on the testimony presented today, the court is also satisfied that there's sufficient probable cause as to count two, weapons, firearms, possession by felon. The court was in possession of a certified judgment of sentence. And then as to count three, police officer assaulting, resisting, obstructing, there's sufficient probable cause based on the testimony of the allegation that he did resist or obstruct by giving a false name or caused to or endangered the officer by causing some injury. The court satisfied there's sufficient probable cause on that count. That will also be bound over to the circuit court. Bind over date is going to be March 9th. You do not need to appear in court on March 9th. That's the date that the circuit court receives the file from the district court. Your next court date will be in circuit court. It will be a pre-trial. And your attorney will be made aware of that date and be in contact with you from then. Okay, sir? Do you have any questions? Brian will set a 2,000 cash surety that will continue. Any additional matters for the record?
Nothing for the people.
Nothing for the attention.
Okay, you're all set.
Thank you.
We're an hour ahead of schedule.
Well, we did good, we're all done. And it's not 5 o'clock.
Right, 4 o'clock this time.